Hello, Professor. Today I will be talking about the historical significance and criticism of the Yellow Wallpaper, written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Charlotte Perkins Gilman explores women's oppression and mental health in the 19th century in The Yellow Wallpaper. I believe that her writing directly reflects this period, but also is a criticism of the patriarchal society that women had to suffer through during this time. And I also believe Gilman's views and opinions on this period and really the roles that men played in women's suffering is also directly reflected in her writing. Now, the story follows a woman who is suffering with her mental health, with no support from her husband. He is a doctor and suggests that she rest to cure her mental health struggles, but really this drives her to go crazy, and more suffering, of course, but it eventually leads her to her freedom. So really, John, her husband, negligence is what gives her her liberation eventually. Now, I think this also reflects how men viewed women's mental health and feelings during the 19th century. Really, women were not allowed to have their own thoughts or opinions or feelings. And this was a great example of that. John believes that rest is the only cure, even though the narrator thinks that if she was doing things, it would really help her because she's just sitting and thinking, and which causes her to go crazy, really. Now, John also wants to control his wife, which is by doing the treatment that he is. That is also a great way to do that for him. He wants to control her and basically not listen to what she has to say, because it doesn't matter to him, because all that matters is that he is, making her better, even though he is really the center of her suffering. She's not allowed to be her own person with her own thoughts or feelings or opinions. Now, I also believe, through my research, I have discovered that the social, cultural, and economic values of the 19th century are also reflected in this story, and they're all centered around the gender roles of this period. Men and women really had very separate lives, even though they were married. They had specific responsibilities to the both of them. Men were supposed to be out in public, at their jobs, growing in their careers, providing for their families, while women were really supposed to only be in their homes in private and tending to their children and to domestic duties. And I think this also creates a power imbalance between men and women, which I also saw in the story. There are clear responsibilities for both genders, and going into the other one is really not socially acceptable during this time. Also, the narrator does not need to suffer because John is providing for her, and that's how he feels. There's a quote in the story. Now, Gilman says, "John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there's no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him." This is on page 198. But ironically, John is the center of her suffering, but he feels that he is providing for her, so he feels that he is providing for her, so there's no reason for her to suffer, even though she is really struggling. Now, even though it really greatly reflects the 19th century, I also feel it's a criticism of this period. Also, the story, when it was published, it was not taken well by critics because it was criticizing the way men played into women's suffering during this time, even though the story had a great impact on women and their mental health as well. Now, Gilman was a big voice in women's rights, so of course I do believe that her views on women's suffering and what they had to endure during this time were directly reflected in the story. Overall, I think Charlotte Perkins Gilman does a great job at reflecting but also criticizing women's oppression during this time period. And it was and I think she did a great job with that. Thank you.